The other thing that I experienced with Lily Phillips just with that interview is there's no presence there. You look at her and you don't want to like do a double take. She doesn't have a commanding presence. She is extremely uncomfortable in her skin, extremely agreeable, like will not challenge anything that they say. She has blinders on. She can't take a compliment. It's really, really self-deprecating, missing energy. And all of these are signs of really, really deep father wounds. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack here, and today I want to get into a conversation about women and their dads. And I have some examples and anecdotes to pepper in, as I always do, but I think this is a beautifully, beautifully important conversation, and it can't be had enough. And I saw a couple of things this week that had me put some of this together around father wounds, or what many like to call daddy issues, and how they come up in different ways. And it's just really important to understand the nuances around this. So, just jumping straight in, I watched a video of Tim Kennedy. He's like, I don't know exactly who he is, what his title is, but he's a former military strongman type of person, and talks about family and God, and yeah, just like a very strong presence in the online space around fatherhood and warriorship. And he did a video with his daughter sitting on his lap. And he was doing that video that a lot of parents have been doing over the last few weeks, which is starting off the phrases that used to be commonly known, in the past. And they call them like toxic phrases, in the way that maybe my generation and older generations have grown up, and seeing if how their kids finish those phrases. So like, phrases like, I brought you into this world, and then seeing how those kids finish it. And what's really sweet is these kids don't know the ends to those phrases, which is really lovely. And that's besides the point. His daughter was sitting on his lap. She must be like 6 or 7. And what I noticed so beautifully was how comfortable and just at ease this girl was in his embrace. He was, he had his hand on her arm. She was really just feeling held and loved, and you could tell she was just, this was a common occurrence to be hugged and embraced and really held by dad, through physical touch. Now, you might be thinking this is normal, but I don't think it is. I actually don't think it is. I think that in the past, or any man that father wound, mother wounds, intimacy issues in general, actually does have a hard time bringing that to his kids. Not that he doesn't want to and probably would have loved to, but there's a block and a barrier there. And so I've met and know a lot of women that didn't get held or physically touched or embraced by dad in that way that it's so, so needed. And I think for little girls, there's this real desire to be embraced and to be held. That's so, so key. And so when little girls don't get that, they effectively decide that, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving of the attention. And what that does is that's one of the aspects of the father wound, that physical touch and that distance. And so what happens there is that the distance is created, and she then continues to live her life through the eyes of that father wound. And so the reason I bring this up, and it's always, girl dad content is always just so healing and beautiful to watch, because it's so important and needed. In that, let's talk about the direct contrast of that. So, I think we're drawn to watch the things that we want to watch. I think for me, I'm always able to glean some insights and some feeling about people and the way they interview, and also even in films and in movies, right? You could say that films and movies are fake, they're make believe, but the people that wrote the stories are real humans that are going through a human experience and always have. Therefore, they're writing stories based on their truth and their emotion. And so I think that we can always pick things from the media and film that's really helping us kind of understand these archetypes that continue to show up over and over and over again as, all over the world with people, and it really connects us, right? So I watched Lily Phillips on trigonometry with Konstantin Kisin and his partner. And I really wanted to watch her because I wanted to understand what I could pick up from her. Lily Phillips, if you don't know, she's the British woman who is the OnlyFans creator, sex worker, who slept with 100 men in one day, had sex with 100 men in one day. And she wanted to come on that interview and wanted to talk. And so for me, my big takeaway throughout that whole interview, which was like an hour, was this woman has deep, deep, deep father wounds. Deep, deep, deep father wounds. She is extremely uncomfortable in her skin, extremely agreeable, like will not challenge anything that they say. She has blinders on. She can't take a compliment. And all of these are signs of really, really deep father wounds. She said a couple of times, like, oh, yeah, my dad was great. He was a perfect dad. And it's very clear that that statement was a lie to me. Again, I'm not an expert here. I don't know her personally. I have never spoken to her. I am just sharing my intuition based on what I see and based on what I know. And I think it's really important. What I'm getting is that her first heartbreak was the lack of attention that her dad gave her, right? Her first heartbreak. And so why I'm saying this is because I want to connect it back to what I just talked about with Tim Kennedy and his daughter. When there is no physical embrace, there's this longing, this desire for that physical embrace. And a lot of times what girls will decide in that absence, in that distance, in not really getting the answer to the big question in every little girl's heart, which is, am I beautiful? Am I worthy? Am I enough? And when her dad is not present, the answer becomes no. And so a lot of young women will decide like, oh, okay, well, I can get that. I can get that met through sex. I can get that longing met through sex. Even if it's breadcrumbs, at least I can get it later on when they become older. And so I think this is a very like extreme case. We're talking about a very extreme case that's happening here, but obviously this is along a spectrum. And so it's just really interesting that she wants love so, so badly. But when they ask her about, like, do you want to get married? Do you want to have kids? She says, yes, of course, eventually. But right now, I'm just having fun. And I think she's got this dissonance in her brain. She's got blinders on in that, yeah, there's this like fairy tale marriage love story that exists one day, but I'm not good enough for that. All I'm good for is this. And so I'm going to fill my need in this way and kind of take it to the extreme and try to get as much attention as possible because of the lack of attention and the distance that I had with dad, right? And it's super interesting because that's what I see. That's what I experienced when I watched her. And then we can kind of take that and understand that there's so many different ways that the father wound gets expressed when it's unhealed and when it's not being tended to. This is one super far extreme case, right? And so I think what's really interesting is this little girl. Let's go back to, so we're done with that, Lily Phillips. This little girl that is Tim Kennedy's daughter. There's a confidence in her skin already, a boldness, a knowing that she can answer the questions the way she really believes she wants to answer them, and it's going to be okay. She's safe with him. She's safe in his arms. And this is so foundational for a little girl to go out and be bold and be brave and be herself and be interested in the things that she's interested in, all while knowing she has this really trustworthy man that has her back. It's such an interesting fallacy, which is what feminism did. This idea of, in order to be bold and brave and courageous as a woman, I have to distrust men and I have to carve my own path without men. which is the biggest fallacy ever. Because what that actually is not bravery, it's not courage, it's not real presence, it's just proving energy. And it can manifest on two sides of the coin, right? It can manifest in the aggressive boss babe kind of manifestation, or it can manifest in the quiet, mousy kind of manifestation where it's just still trying to prove. It's like, it's still saying, like, please love me. I have a lack. I have a lack. And then the other one is saying, you know, stay away from me. I have a lack. I'm going to do it by myself. And so it's just wild to me because the women that are the most present in their skin are the ones that trust men, right? So it's like imagine Tim Kennedy's little girl growing up. Her whole notion of life, it's like she can be safe in expressing herself, in, jumping as high as she wants to because she has the safety of her dad around her, that container. And she's not missing that embrace and being held. And it's just so clear the links there and just so clear how important dad is in that whole equation for boys too. But I'm just focusing on little girls right now. The other thing that I experienced with Lily Phillips just with that interview is there's no presence there. Like you look at her and you don't want to like do a double take. She doesn't have a commanding presence, right? There's no confidence. There's no self-esteem. It's really, really self-deprecating, missing energy. And that's all the way on the far end of the spectrum. I recently went to a dinner with some friends, and there were some people I knew, and there were just a couple of new couples that I had never met. And it was really fascinating because I was sitting across from this woman and I couldn't feel her. Like I couldn't feel her at all. It was almost like there was this wall, these blinders that she had on. I couldn't feel her because she couldn't feel herself. And I had this inkling. I was like, oh, I bet she's on birth control. And lo and behold, I found out after more conversation because women share too much information with each other too quickly. I found out that, yeah, indeed, because she was like, oh, I forgot to take it. And she went to go get it. So I was like, wow, I was right. That is part of it. But there's also a father wound there, and that I can't just be here. I'm not safe here. I'm not okay here. I'm not, I can't trust me here because I can't trust the world. And the whole world of a little girl is her dad's arms, right? It's just so pivotal. I am like so passionate about this, the father wound and healing that. And I've helped so many women come to the realization of this and just having these conversations and just trying to get to the bottom of this. I think that's so key. This actually reminds me of I don't know if you guys remember there was a 90s movie called My Best Friend's Wedding. It was Julia Roberts, Dermot Mulroney. I love this film. That's why I know all this. And Cameron Diaz. And effectively, Julia Roberts and Dermot Mulroney, they're these like longtime friends, been friends for a decade, right? Long distance, longtime friends. And there is the whole deal where, if they turn 28, and neither of them are married, they'll get married. That was the premise. And one night he calls her and he says, hey, I've met her. I've met my person. And the whole tale is she tries to stop the wedding. The beautiful thing, you guys should watch this film, is that Julia Roberts' character represents the boss babe, feminist, not vulnerable, hard, unfeeling type of woman, even though she's gorgeous, even though she's successful, she's all the things. Whereas Cameron Diaz's character is the extremely well loved by her dad, extremely just present and willing to express her emotions and her vulnerability and herself and willing to love. And she's the one that he chooses, which is just so clear, right? Because she's not hedging any bets in her life. She's just who she is. And there was this one very clear moment where, Julia Roberts had been realizing she's still in love with him, and He says, one of the things I love about my fiance, the Cameron Diaz character, the feminine character, the vulnerable characters, she lets me hold her in public for as long as I want to. She just lets me hold her. And the Julia Roberts character is just like, I let you hold me. And he says, no, you didn't. You would just move and turn away and you wouldn't. It's very profound. And to be able to connect that to the physical touch that I was just talking about, right? Being held by her dad, this little girl. Without that, there's a lack of safety in that. There's a almost this inability to even do that, right? Which is the vulnerability, the I'm yours, the just extreme openness and willingness to kind of wear her heart on her sleeve, which is what the feminine Cameron Diaz's character really did and does. I think it just really showcases this father wound in that moment, right? You could also very much tell that the boss babe Julia Roberts character, she spends her whole life pretending like, oh, I don't have time for that. I don't have time for romance, right? Meanwhile, the Cameron Diaz character, that's her whole MO. That's what she cares about more than anything. And she shows up really fierce and strong and powerful. There's another scene in that really showcases the difference between female vulnerability and power versus female invulnerability and the perception of power or coolness or something. There's a karaoke scene, and the Julia Roberts character sets up the other woman to have to sing because she knows she's a terrible singer. The Julia Roberts character basically thought, oh, she's going to say no, she's not going to do this because it's embarrassing. I've embarrassed her. Whereas this woman, the vulnerable one, the feminine one, she's just like, I'm gonna do it. I know it's gonna make my man happy. I'm gonna sing as bad as I can. I'm gonna sing this love song as loud and as bad as I can to show him how much I love him in public, everywhere. Not gonna be the cool girl. And I think that is so profound, and it speaks to her trusting of life, trusting of men, trusting of this man that she's about to marry, trusting of her own heart. She has a open heart. It's not a boxed heart. And I think that's just really, really powerful and beautiful. And I think there's something special there. And I think, yeah, there's deeply seated father wounds in that thing as well. I think I mentioned this in one of my videos, but there's another really cool example of female grace and vulnerability that I really love from film, and it's from that Mark Wahlberg boxer movie, The Fighter, based on a true story of those two. Man, I have all this information like stored in my head. These two boxers from Boston, like Mickey Ward and the other one of them is a drug addict and the other one is just like this challenger guy that just wants to make it, but he's just got his family is really just sabotaging him at all times. And he meets this woman in the bar and this bartender, and he tells her that he wants to take her out and that he's going to call her the next day or Saturday or something. He doesn't call her. And it's an incredibly powerful thing what happens next, because there's this distinction between the cool girl archetype, right? The one that is the boss babe, the too cool for school, versus the extremely feminine, vulnerable archetype. So, like the cool girl, she would have gotten no call that day. And then she would have lamented about it and become extremely sad and down and like deep down buying into her father wounds, right? Like, well, I'm no good. I don't deserve it. And like, it never happens for me. Everyone that I meet is unavailable. They never want to be with me, all this stuff. Whereas this woman, what she did, she went up to him. It's a small little town, right? In this film, she went up to his house Sunday morning, first thing, was like, and she said, why didn't you call? I was waiting for you to call, showcasing the availability, the truth, right? A little girl that doesn't have father wounds, that has a really healthy embrace from her father, isn't afraid of her feelings. She isn't afraid to say what she feels. It's always okay to say what she feels. And she becomes a woman who trusts men, says what she feels, doesn't hedge, honors that, and shows up really present in the world. It's really intoxicating, right? It's very beautiful. And so she basically says, "Why didn't you call me?" Very clear, very upfront. And he had lost his fight that night, and so he thought that she wouldn't want to be with him. That's his own insecurity, his own fear. And to see that feminine power and that feminine leadership kind of leading the way through vulnerability and in the only way that a truly feminine woman can do, it is just really intoxicating for him. And then he was like, wow, she's making me feel like I'm worth something, like I'm good enough, right? And then he then wants to become even better and better and better and better. It's extremely powerful, and it's the magic of femininity and women and what women can do when they have those very strong foundations of trust with their dad. And then, everything becomes clear and they fall in love and everything is beautiful. And it's just a really beautiful example of that, because she could have not shown up and she could have thought that he was bad, all men suck, blah 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 blah, which is what so many women with father wounds do, instead of just putting yourself out there, putting your heart on your sleeve. Another fun example. This is fun. I'm just like giving fun examples today. I started reading Love Letters to Vera by Vladimir Nabokov, right? The man who wrote Lolita. And I just thought it's like a collection of all the letters he ever wrote to his wife. There's a really cool story in the beginning of this book about how they even met. And it speaks to feminine power and feminine mystique and feminine vulnerability. It speaks to the way that feminine energy goes first usually, whereas masculine energy takes action first, but it needs to have something to react to, right? It needs to have the presence of a woman to react to. And the way a woman becomes a very present, sexy, sensual, vulnerable woman out in the world, the world, that trusts men, is by having that foundation with her dad. And it's incredibly important. And of course, we can all heal. And I'm so passionate about this because I went through that healing journey myself, um, having a lot of distance when I was little, feeling that lack. And just, so many of us are alongside the spectrum of like what that does. And for me, it just made me kind of just try to overdo and like overgive, and just I've been the cool girl so many times, so scared to put my heart out on the table and my feelings on the table in my early 20s, especially during college. So many experiences, but it was just like such a beautiful opportunity to learn and to understand. And this is why I'm so passionate about these topics, because they're foundational in my life and my growth. And so back to Nabokov and Vera. So the story goes that Vladimir Nabokov, I hope you guys are enjoying these little historical tidbits. So Soviet Union was created 1917, and him and his family were immigrants to Germany. They immigrated right as the Soviet Union was being created, because I imagine they were from a more aristocratic class. And they were moved to Berlin. There was a Russian-speaking newspaper that was happening there in Berlin, and Nabokov started getting his poetry published in this newspaper. So weekly, he would get something published, his poetry, his prose. And he was supposed to get married to this other woman named Svetlana. And he was like 21, 22 at the time, and Svetlana was 17. And there was this thing, her parents had agreed, and he was writing all these love poems, right, about his love and his romance. And ultimately, something happened where they just said that the wedding won't happen. And so he was really heartbroken. It was because they thought that he wasn't financially viable enough for their daughter. You know how things went back during those days. And so he started to write, a little bit more of tragic and melancholic prose in the newspaper every week. And Vera had been reading this newspaper, and she had been like following this man's story and had been kind of falling in love with him through his words and just his mastery. I always talk about a woman really experiences a man's mastery as something that is really attractive in something. And so once she read between the lines, she saw that, okay, He's not in love anymore. He's clearly heartbroken. He's single again. It's time to make my, feminine energy known. And so there was a masquerade ball one night, and she put on this mask, and then she found him, and then she started reciting some of his work to him, basically like that, showcasing her admiration for his work and what he does. And that is how he became privy to her. It was her feminine power, her feminine boldness and courage to just go after that, go after what she wanted in a way that I think is really, really, really beautiful. And there is something to that. That kind of behavior, that kind of trust and willingness comes from healthy father foundations. That's how that goes, right? Same thing as the woman in the fighter. Thinking back to the beginning of this, when I was talking about Tim and his daughter, thinking back to where all of that comes from is her and that moment sitting on her dad's lap and being embraced by him. And so thinking back to what is possible for a little girl as she gets older and she becomes a woman and she values herself. And it was in Stacey Eldridge's book Captivating, which I finished recently. She talks about how Eve was Adam's Ezer Kenegdo, right? Which is counterpart, true counterpart, flesh of my flesh. And so a woman, her whole role is to be the counterpart for something, to be the relational support and the one who helps something come to be, right? And so in Stacey's book, she talks about how, a woman, she wants to go do missionary work in Colombia where there's crime, right? She becomes like the counterpart for helping healing happen there. She becomes like the supporter, the caretaker for anything in the world. And that's really powerful and profound. And there's this desire to help people and help the world and provide that nurture and that care. And I think that is really naturally embedded within a woman. And it comes to life when she has a solid father that embraces her physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way. Just makes her feel like, yeah, I am something. I am beautiful. I have something special to offer this world. And it's incredibly beautiful to witness that. And every single woman, every single little girl has the opportunity to be that way in the world. And there's been a lot of pain and a lot of hurt. And there's a lot of healing that is possible. And so, something that I just think is so important about these conversations and ancient intelligence is this notion that yes, moms and dads together raising kids is the answer to so many of the problems in our world, right? And mom and dad having healed themselves and having mature, kind, compassionate, open relationship, not open sexually, open in curiosity about each other, right? And so I think there's something to that. And then you get happy, healthy kids that feel loved and understood, that then go on to be trustworthy adults that want to co-create with the opposite sex. And so hope that's been a nice little episode about dads and daughters. Hello, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm so happy to be here bringing my wisdom, my truths, all the research I do into pop culture and evolutionary psych and beyond to bring men and women the information that we all need to know to find that ultimate harmony with each other. This is the mission. This is why I'm here. This is what I believe in. So if you found value in what I'm doing here, please help me grow the podcast. And you can do one of two things. Either share the episode with a friend or leave me a review on Spotify or Apple. This will help me so much. Until next time.